Aloha, everybody, and welcome to Elephants in Our Rooms. And I'm your host, Janet Care Lessin, with my co-host, Debra DeFranco, and Karen Christine Patrick. And I hope I didn't come on before the on-air side. I hope we got that recorded. Karen Christine Patrick, Janet Care Lessin, and Debra DeFranco on Elephants in Our Rooms. We're going to talk about all kinds of really cool things, like what's going on in the world. I made a list of 9 items, but I'm sure we have about 15 or 20. So let's see. Let's start with Debra DeFranco. What's your burning share? What's the top topic that you want to bring to discussion this afternoon here? Well, I guess it's still afternoon for most of the world. Okay. Go ahead, Debra.
They arrested another ex-member of Trump's cabinet, for Steve Bannon, for fraud, for that private wall that was being crowdfunded. They arrested him and 3 others today for fraud. They apparently embezzled millions of dollars from a nonprofit after they claimed they would take no money, that 100% of it would go to the wall. And they set up, because GoFundMe contacted them, and the man who started it, I don't remember his name, he's an ex-vet. They told him that if there was not a nonprofit connected to this, that he would not get the money. So they set up several nonprofits as front companies, and then they set up LLCs that sent invoices to these nonprofits, and they siphoned off millions of dollars. $25 million was raised. And they siphoned off something like $5 million through fraudulent invoices to these nonprofits. And so all 4 of them connected to this got arrested today. And Steve Bannon, according to an hour ago, pled not guilty.
Oh, well, what do you think about that? You think he's not guilty?
Oh, stop it. That man is so corrupt. It's ridiculous. I also believe he's part of the active measures campaign to divide this country and to eliminate the Democratic Party and have the Republicans and the conservatives completely in charge. I believe they're trying to set up a dictatorship. I believe that's the end game of the active measures campaign. I believe they want to eliminate all other political parties, and they want to stay in control.
I think they already have a dictatorship, and that's kind of what they do. We get so blind to what's going on, we don't notice it. I had James Tolley on yesterday with my brother. I had a Republican, an Independent, and a Democrat talking with James Tolley. It was a very interesting show, and but he said you don't really know what's going on until they come marching down the street with guns. Then you get it.
Absolutely.
And we're not getting it. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that's what Trump's plan was when he was sending those troops to all of the cities, Seattle, Portland, Chicago, Minneapolis, right? He planned on doing that in every city, and it backfired on him.
Well, I think he was just the trial run. Like it's what he's planning in the fall when he doesn't win the election. He's not going to step down because they're all going to go to the jail. He doesn't want to go to jail.
You have to remember one thing about this country that the rest of the world does not understand. We are very flexible people and deal with change very easily. Other countries don't understand how we can change presidents every 4 years and be okay with it, or change parties in control. And if Trump thinks he's going to get away with it, he underestimates the American people, because they will take to the streets without a doubt. I pass it back to you.
Okay, and I do want to ask Karen her opinion, but let me just say one more thing. That's what they want us to take to the streets, because then they can start shooting us down. Do you really think we're going to be able to take our little guns and stand up to the assault weapons that the military has?
Yes, ma'am.
And the tanks?
Yes. I got into this argument with my brother, who is a conservative like yours, He is a vet. He is also active duty National Guard. And he has a lot of political connections. And, you know, he said the one thing that people don't realize, especially people who are gun control advocates, is the one reason why this country has not been invaded is because every country in the world knows just about every household in this country has a gun. So think about that.
Right, I understand that. I understand that theory. However, I kind of remember, what was that? It was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and what was his name? The guy, you know, the Tomb Raider. He came up.
Indiana
guy
Jones.
who had this whip. Indiana Jones. And this guy's got this whip, and he's there's knives or whatever he's twirling, and then he just picks up his gun and he hits him right between the eyes. So I think the same thing is like we've got all these little BB guns, you know, compared to theirs, and they'll just come down with a tank. And then what are you going to do against that? Because we keep thinking they're going to play civilized war. But this is what happened with the American Revolution. The military at the time they had a whole strategy in how you did war. You marched, you know, you did everything in a system. But what the Indians, Native Americans did was they, you know, used arrows and they jumped up and, you know, would slice your throats or something. So they used guerrilla warfare, and we were used to war. So we're thinking like in terms of, oh yeah, well we're going to be able to sit up on the rooftop and, you know, shoot the military, and they're going to go, and they're going to die. And we've seen one too many Western, but they're going to go another level. I mean, the military has, you know, ray guns and shit that we don't know about. They have.
The military in this country will not turn on its people. I don't believe that for a minute.
Okay, well, then the active measures will make them believe these are not your people.
No.
Right?
I've talked to my son-in-law who's deployed over in Germany. He says most of the soldiers don't support Trump. You have a small segment of soldiers that do, but the majority of them don't support him. And the military, especially the brass, was very disturbed what went on at Lafayette Square.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. What do you think, Karen?
Oh, my goodness. Where do I start? Go ahead, Deborah. I'm still trying to gather my thoughts, man.
Well, I don't believe the military will turn on its people. They do not support this man, especially the way he has bashed them, the things he's done. He's never been a soldier. He did everything he could to get out of serving. He doesn't speak well of the military, of the generals. Like I said, there's a small segment of the population that supports him. No. I do not believe for a second that these generals will turn on their country and turn on their people. I don't.
Okay. So, Karen, what do you think?
Well, oh, man, there's so much there. I just want to back up to the Bannon story because he got arrested on a multi-million-dollar yacht by the post office because the post office, it was postal fraud. So that was kind of like, at least they didn't defund that part of the post office, thankfully. I hope they put him in a box and mailed him on a slow boat back from that yacht, you know what I'm saying? But like he'd have to be. But I mean, that was interesting. Yes, it was the post office. They have their own sort of policing because they deal with mail fraud, which this type of crime came under mail fraud. So then, I don't know, I just imagined him in a box, just going really, really slow through this. We talked to our, so this week I was working on my first podcast episode for a podcast about the caregivers in UBI. And I was, talking about the hassle that people are going through, caregivers are going through with the COVID, trying to get the meds to grandma, And I worked with my pharmacy and I got all my meds except for one that had to be refrigerated. I got it coming to my house, via the post office. And then I saw what was coming down the pike, and I said, I think I better change my mind. So I changed it all back, and I'm just imagining millions of people, if they had the chance to change it and change it back, are just scrambling to do it. And my pharmacy people are the nicest people, and they're like, yes, we know, you know. So it's a whole plate of crazy altogether. But I think some of the things like messing with the post office and taking funds from updating, military base type of buildings and schools and things that they have on military bases. The funds were taken from those, military endeavors and put to the border wall. And now we're going to need to look at the governmental contracts of the border wall, because the Bannon one was a nonprofit-based one, but sort of a private effort. But we need to track what's going on with the border funds, and then find out, was there fraud involved in hiring the contractors? And I don't know if y'all saw the part of the wall that blew over in a dust storm. That was actually in New Mexico. That was in New Mexico, and I'm going, oh, hey, the lowest bidder for the contract, right?
Of course.
And so, I mean, they're going to need. I'm wondering if there's an inspection process of, were they hired to put up steel and they put up tin? I'm not sure, but I mean, this is just whenever they're going to be doing something. I mean, Brett and I were talking this morning about how many former Trump. I have lost count of how many former Trump administration officials have been jailed and arrested and awaiting trials, etc. They posted their mugshots on a poster today on one of the news sites. It was a lot, including the Trump's former lawyer who keeps calling Kamala a nasty woman, and I'm going, I thought you liked nasty women. You know what I'm saying? that got Cohen in trouble paying that off. So it's kind of like, it's just a whole plate of crazy. But I think something that kind of helps me stay with it is there's still, people with ethics all the way around. It's hard to see maybe we got different ideas, but we're now cutting into stuff that we do agree on. The post office is one of the most popular. There's some people that don't like it because it's not privatized, but is one of the most popular and reliable services that we have from the government. And I did a report on Benjamin Franklin in the 7th grade, and I know that he was the one that got us our post office. So, it's a whole plate of crazy. It's just a whole plate of crazy.
Well, you got to remember, a lot of his supporters are rural residents, and they depend on the post office. That's how they get prescriptions. A lot of them are out in the middle of nowhere. So, you're talking about something that'll become a bipartisan issue, not just a left-wing issue.
That's what
I don't understand.
Dealing with the military
I don't understand
stuff.
Who's going to
bipartisan too. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say I don't see where Trump's base is going to be left after he keeps alienating everybody. It's almost like an abusive relationship. How many times does he have to punch his people in what ways before, they end up leaving his loyalty and no longer being loyal to him. So they're eliminating his the postal service, which many of them rely on. I lived up in a rural place called State College, and while there was a major university there, it was 3 hours away from anything else, right? So between me and the next largest city was at least 3 hours of just rolling farm fields, and that's why everything was expensive. But you eliminate our postal service, how are we going to get anything, right? So that was just like a kind of insane. But the other thing is that Trump has all these strategies to get all of his supporters out there and get infected. And no matter how you cut it, there's a great portion that are dying. He cut some of his people that were at his convention that, they're dead now. So that's your base.
Herman Cain.
That's Trump's base. Yeah, what's his name? Yeah, Herman Cain. That's your base
Herman
that you're
Cain.
killing off. Not the Democrats. You've got your own people dying. So But I guess he does. He thinks he has enough people to vote him in, and he doesn't need to protect his own people. So it's insane. I'll pass the talking stick. Who wants to keep going? What do you want to talk about? Are we done with? Are we complete with the post office? So they're trying to remove the post office, and they're going to.
No, we're not done.
Are
with
they
that
really going to put
they,
back? Yeah, go ahead. Continue then.
They're not putting back the equipment. The postal employees already confirmed it today. They're just not going to continue down that path, but they're not reversing what they already did. And DeJoy, it turned out, bypassed background checks. They just found that out today, too. So now there's going to be a hearing about that. And they believe he's not qualified, and he was not vetted the way the others were vetted. Yes. So another crime that his administration has committed. So let's hope that, the Democrats win and they all go to jail.
So how are they going to? So how are they going to do this delivery when they had? I mean, what percentage of the equipment did they yank? I mean, they were yanking and destroying it. They weren't yanking it and putting it so you could put it back in place. They wanted to make sure it was destroyed. The sorting equipment that sort, 30,000 pieces a minute or whatever. So how are we going to do this now? That's no longer there.
The states are making contingency plans to get the ballots delivered. And I'll say this, and I may sound crazy, but don't be surprised if Amazon doesn't step in and help.
If who?
Amazon doesn't step in and help.
Oh, Amazon.
They're now delivering 70% of their own packages through their own delivery services. So don't be surprised if Jeff Bezos doesn't come to the rescue of the American people just to put one more dagger in Donald Trump.
Wow.
I get most of my Amazon through. I get most of my Amazon through USPS, so it seems like USPS is bailing out Amazon.
No.
They don't
That's
have
only
the system set up here.
No, it's the last. USPS only does the last leg. USPS is not responsible for the packages from start to finish. They're only responsible for the last leg of the delivery. And honestly, that business is keeping the USPS alive. So if you slow it down and companies start moving to other services, you're just going to put them out of business just that much sooner.
Well, for a while there, we had most everything was coming here via FedEx and then UPS, and then all of a sudden it all shifted to USPS. So that must be the changes that are going on behind the scenes that I'm not aware of that you're talking about. All right. So next person.
Hey, there's only one next person. You guys are funny. Like we have a really large panel or very important.
Yes, next person.
Good.
I was checking to see if you're paying attention.
I am paying attention. Yes, I'm. After that, what can you say? It's just this is so wrong, and this is one of the things. Like tracking all the different aspects of what's going on with the post office, besides people's medication, is I kind of go in and out of Etsy to see what kinds of things is going on there with art and stuff, and something like 85% of Etsy shop owners are women, and that is their primary way of shipping. So this is, what we're doing right now to small business. So if you're a big business, you get a grant basically and a bailout. If you're a smaller business, you get a loan, which how the heck are you going to pay for a loan when the last group of people got one stimulus check, your customers? I mean, this is just not, this is, I'll tell you what this is. Living in New Mexico, we do have a type of rainstorm that is called a virga, Virga, virga. And you look out on the plane and you see this thing, it's unbelievable. It starts to rain, it gets about halfway down, and then it gets evaporated back up again because the desert's so hot and dry. That's what trickle down is right now. it just kind of falls down. You get to see it, right? And then it goes back away and out of reach. You know, one of the things that the people who follow Andrew Yang say, and there's even something called the Trickle Up podcast, is let's trickle up. Instead of starting saving everything at the top, save everything at the bottom, and they'll support the top. Isn't that a way a pyramid works, right? In other words, there's literally nothing happening for regular people because it never ever trickles down. In fact, I sometimes call it tinkled on economy. That's what it feels like. But yeah, so one of the things that's going on is Kamala Harris, our new Democratic VP nominee.
Kamala. I have to correct you. It's Kamala.
Kamala. Sorry, I'm
like Kamala.
Kamala. Oh, I saw that. Kamala. Randy Rainbow. That was the best. Did you guys see that? Randy Rainbow did Kamala.
Great.
It was really fun. Yeah. So yes, Kamala. Her bill. She has a bill that is for temporary retroactive COVID rebates, what you're calling it, and basically it would give every adult $2,000 a month retroactive to March when we were shutting everything down, and I think $500 per kid. I'm not sure how that works. But that bill is like, I feel a lot better about that bill knowing kind of that she's risen in the ranks, there to be able to talk about it and present it. And what's kind of cool about that from a, Yang Gang person point of view, we call ourselves the Yang Gang. I'm looking at my Yang stuff. What Brett walks by and goes, Yang Gang. He teases me all the time. Is that if that bill got passed, we'd actually see the biggest test of the basic income concept in the world. And it would be really good because we would experience it for however many months that we're dealing with the COVID situation. A really stark statistic is something like 40% of the people who lost their jobs may never work again. And I can validate to that from the 2008 turn down. There's a lot of people in the town I was at that didn't work again because it never did quite recover to the level that it was before for a lot of workers. And this is also a time that automation ramps up like crazy to protect. So we're talking about Amazon. They're one of the leaders of adopting robotics and AI. I definitely feel the other day I got a real live human dealing with Amazon. They shipped me some plastic storage bins, but they didn't ship me my lids. And I got a real live human, but she was completely useless. So I was like, maybe I wanted the AI after all. It might have actually helped me with my problem. But there's a lot of jobs that we've had the technology to replace, but there hasn't really been they've been percolating along in development, such as AI for the phones and order processing and driverless trucks and things like that. And in order to protect supply lines, when the people component of your supply line is at risk, would be to automate. So it'd be a situation where if we did get some kind of temporary UBI, assistance, and everyone kind of gets what it is, that it's not necessarily about free money. It's about putting a floor to poverty and supporting people through all these changes. So that's kind of percolating in a positive sense. I like to kind of check in with those people from time to time because, man, the rest of the news is, it's kind of unbelievable. It really is. There's nothing that would surprise me. Sometimes someone put a dummy, report about something and go, oh, really? Trump said that? And it's like, it wasn't true, but you know what? It sounded true.
It sounds like Trump.
Yeah.
Well, I just pulled up the stimulus. It's not a YouTube, but an article. And so they're going to, it looks like they're going to pass the skinny GOP relief bill, which is $300 for extra federal unemployment benefits until December 21st. Another round of money for the Paycheck Protection Program, $10 billion for the U.S. Postal Service, and liability protections, which really doesn't cost much. So they got out of so that's a scaled back version of the $1 trillion HEALS Act that was introduced by the Republicans, but it's also the HEALS Act, the original one proposed by the House, was $3 trillion. So they went down from $3 trillion, and Republicans got it down to $1 trillion, and now it's going to be even scaled back from the $1 trillion. And so it's unlikely that we're going to get any stimulus checks in this round. So maybe what you're saying is that Kamala Harris is proposing a different act. I'll have to look that one up. But who's saying well? Go ahead.
Well, they had over the new unemployment filings for the week exceeded over 1 million people again. So it may be signaling that the economy is beginning to tank. So if that keeps on, which I suspect it will, I suspect it's going to grow again. It's going to continue to grow because all the stimulus money has run out for both the corporations and the individuals. And everything that was preventing the layoffs before, there's now no longer any barriers. So you're going to start seeing massive layoffs. You're going to start seeing companies restructure. But I want to say this about small businesses that everybody misses. Small businesses generate 80% of all new jobs in this country. So if you want to salvage this economy, you must support the small businesses. Otherwise, we will end up in a depression.
Besides thinking of how to restart this economy, we still have the wolf at the door, this virus, which has not gone away. And so
it's going to get worse
think
this
on
winter.
That level. Yeah, so how are we going to do anything? We really have to think way outside of the box because, I have to catch myself. I go, I'll take this down to Goodwill. Is Goodwill open? I'll take this down to the restore. Is it open? I'll take, so I've got this stuff backing up my house. I like to take things down to the charities, right, and keep my house cleaned up. And it's like, well, I'll just store it over here for now until something happens, but it might be another year, right? And then I've filled up a corner. I have tenants, and they just leave shit all the time. It's like, take it with you. Take it to the dump. Don't leave it for me. So anyway, so that I was totally reliant on all these small businesses, and we were recycling a lot of good stuff. There was a big Savers here. That all failed even before this stuff. So how are we going to get things? Our mall before COVID had a lot of empty stores. Several of our malls. You go in there and it's like, wow, this is like a ghost town. We're not doing something right here. I know Trump's been saying he's got a wonderful economy, but I'm sorry, it's not what it once was. We once had malls that were full of stores. We once had streets that did not have homeless on every corner with their shopping carts they stole from one of the grocery stores. So something's been wrong for a long time, but then COVID hit and it's really gone bad. So any ideas on how to redo our world where we got homes for, we have to look at things like basic minimum needs. Me.
I got my hand up, I'm going up and down, you guys.
You got your feet up and your hands up. Go, girl, go.
Yeah,
go,
okay.
Girl.
Okay. So before COVID, so if you think of it this way, is that if the economy was a car, okay, and you had a little Yugo compared to a Hummer, and you put crash test dummies in them, and you crash them both into a wall, is the resiliency and strength of your vehicle is going to depend on how it's built. If it's barely made of tin and aluminum foil, it's going to crumple. Or if it's made kind of like a smaller tank, it's probably not going to crumple. COVID is kind of like the crash. It's kind of like a test of the resiliency of a lot of things. Our economy, but also our healthcare system, our reserves of masks and equipment. All kinds of things are being tested here. And we're failing because we do not have the resilient system that we needed pre-COVID, okay? So backing up and doing the history lesson, let's go back to the Reagan administration. And in the Reagan administration, they decided to go with what eventually became called Reaganomics, and it was called supply-side economics. And I tell you what, I know about this because Milton Friedman, the guy who did Reaganomics, was at my college, and I was in the second row and watching him speak. I heard everything he said about it. And this is the problem with current conservative thinking is that they think we have capitalism. We don't. We have supply-side economics because that's different than, basic free market 101 stuff that they tell you. But the most basic thing is that there's supply and demand. And if the supply goes up, the price goes down and the demand, will accumulate it. Or if the demand goes up, the price goes up and then the suppliers don't have to. It is kind of like a scale if you think of it as a scale. But they've been tipping it towards the supply side so long. So the tax cut. So why did they do the tax cut? Because that's supply side theory. It's saying if you give money to the quote unquote job creators, and deregulate them and let them just give them free rein to do whatever they want, then what will happen is you'll have growth. But the kind of growth they measure is like the GDP Wall Street casino kind of growth. Okay, it's not the growth of our wealth as individuals, our work as non-jobby people. None of it. That's not in the GDP. It's the guy who invented it said it was a bad idea to measure. It was just one index. There's many other indexes we could be using to look at the overall health of the economy. Now, Milton Friedman, the economist, said to balance out, okay, we're going to deregulate and give these guys more tax breaks. The balance was supposed to be something called a negative income tax, which meant that if your income dropped below a certain point, you got a tax refund equal to getting you up over the poverty line. They never did that. They only listened to the part that got them rich. They didn't listen to the part that would have given people stability. That would have been kind of a functional basic income. They didn't do it. Now that we are this many more years down the road from that time, and we have wealth inequality that's off the charts, we got if you look at something like a graphic of how much money the 1% has versus everybody else, it will explain many things about what's going on. So you take that, thing and you round it into the, wall, so to speak. You have a disaster or something that affects everybody kind of thing. And we're crumpling like a Yugo. Sorry, Yugo company, but there we are. Because we did not build up the strength and resiliency of our country. And the strength and resilience of this country is its people. It's the regular people. The strength and resilience of our millionaires does not measure how we really are. Because we live here, we get our money here, we spend our money here, and saving your corporations, your franchises and all that stuff, and then just by giving them everything and destroying your customers is the elephant in the room. It truly is.
Right. It is.
That's why I love the title of this thing, because there's some obvious things that we never seem to talk about in the news or, at the water cooler or in the halls of Congress. So here we are now with the test, and the crash test dummies, us, are not doing that well. So that's what we need to do is the basic income, and I know I'm beating that drum a lot, and I appreciate you guys listening, is demand side economics. You give money to that side of it. Now, here's what happens when you do that. And I love that you brought up small business because I've had them off and on for years. When you give people a basic income, they take care of their basic needs, and they improve themselves. And if they got anything left over, a lot of them invest in some kind of venture. If you want to fix the small business community in this country, you would be capitalizing, there's your capitalist word, you'd be capitalizing individuals to be able to make their own job. okay?
Yes.
And if that's going to be me, then I'm going to have some kind of very, very tiny media conglomerate, or perhaps I'm going to sew dresses and sell them. I haven't decided. But I'm gonna do that. I'm not gonna, just take my basic income and sit around. I'm not that kind of person. And so some of the things that Steve Forbes, actually, a Forbes magazine, just came out with a stupid bunch of reasons for not a basic income. And fortunately, in the basic income movement, if you want to know our Merlin sort of figure, our grand spokesperson, that's just one of the best researchers on this, is Scott Scott Santens, Santens. Look him up. He had a rebuttal of Steve Forbes, rebuttal of the basic income that was just spot on. And the kinds of people you find in the movement, by the way, is a lot of people who are technologically able and capacitated. We got a lot of good techies in there. We even have a group, Nerds for Gang. Guys, Nerds for Gang, and then he would, at one point, because they also know, and Andrew Yang, being a tech guy, knows what is the next. You want to say threat, but maybe it isn't. Between us now and the Star Trekian future that Janet, you and I like to talk about, is a transition, and in that transition is the technology. The technology that's behind here is the distribution of wealth. Money is equivalent to a string and two, cups for a telephone. It's so far back in its ability to be fluid. That's why a lot of people are very interested in Bitcoin and stuff like that. We need to have our wealth distribution make sense in order to be able to have everybody get used to the future. And we're not ready for it, but we could be. We're close. We've got the means to. It's not like we don't have the resources to do it. We just have to pry it out of the cold, dead fingers of the, oligarchs. But, why wouldn't they want that? Who's going to buy I say a word right here, but their shit, I'll say it, who's going to buy their shit if they got no money? I don't get those people. I do know that most of the high-tech guys at one time or another did support a basic income. Because, who's going to buy a gadget when you're broke? You're going to buy food. You're going to pay your rent. You're not going to buy an iPhone. So come on. So that's kind of where we're getting a whole list of 99 thesis reasons why demand-side economics in the form of a basic income is a really good idea, and we've almost had it in this country a number of times. So here we go.
Well,
are you done?
Are
you done talking?
I'm off
Say
my
over when you're done. Passing the stick. Okay, go ahead,
Okay.
Deborah. You take it.
The other thing that we could do besides the universal basic income, because I agree with 100% with what Karen said, is microloans. There's organizations that give microloans to people in third world countries for that exact reason, right? That they take that money and they start businesses with it to support themselves and create their own jobs. Why not do something like that here as well? Over.
But I agree with that. Why wasn't, I thought, wow, that's a really good idea. I wonder if they, help me get a sewing machine to keep sewing. But no, it's for someone in Africa, which I thought, a lot of America's starting to look like a third world country, So it's like, it's time for that, But yeah, basically, yes, is to start to look at the people as their own, factory of change and ability to transact with each other. We're broken at the top, and the top just seems really locked into this mindset. And if people follow that, they're just like automatons. They are AI, I think. And they're not listening, and they don't feel like they have to listen. And it's weird to me, because having come from a Republican background growing up, I don't recognize these people. They don't make sense to me. It's kind of like we're
themselves.
We're pro-life until the baby takes its first breath, and then it's a welfare mom and baby. We don't want to run up a deficit unless we want to give a tax break to the rich. It doesn't make sense to me. The principles that they said they were for, obviously, they don't actually believe in. And so we're kind of in a weird, meme shouting cover-up situation where they're actually doing a bunch of crime apparently, and just covering it up with saying that they believe those things, and that maybe some of them do, but do you really? Are you part of the cult, or do you still believe that stuff? That's the question I have for that side. But until they sort themselves out, on the Democrat side, we have the kind of some friction. I know they're trying to wave the unity banner right now in the Democratic convention, but there is tension between the moderate wing and the progressive wing, and then even beyond the progressive wing, actually, people who have followed the Yang thing find themselves actually kind of orphaned from the progressives. Maybe not now, because they finally do see the point of the basic income, but up until the COVID happened, they were for maybe like a job guarantee. I remember Bernie Sanders was talking about a job guarantee, and I really hated that idea because, okay, take the job guarantee and give that to somebody like Trump, and what do you got? Oh, I don't even want to think about what that looks like, because the kind of jobs that would be pretty horrifying, So no, I was not for that unless you had a basic income so that you could decide if you wanted the job or not. You've got to be able to say no. If you don't say no, can't say no, then you're not in, that's not American freedom, because they'll offer you some job, but here's your job, you have to take it, but it's a 4-hour commute, and you've got to take it anyway. No, that doesn't work. That's not even workable for personal situations. Let the person get stabilized first. You've got to be able to have a car and gas in your car and, the things that you need to even go to the job that now probably is your home, but just saying. Okay, stick.
Okay, where do we go after that? Okay, well, there were a couple, just the one last thing that I have on the Oakland Mayor, Libby Shape, said a guaranteed income is probably the most powerful antidote for racial disparities that she could enact. So then St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter, he's kind of coming on board. So what they're doing is the pandemic ensures mayors across the country call for guaranteed income. Powerful in its simplicity, as the pandemic endures, mayors across the country call for guaranteed income. So, Karen, you said you had researched what the mayors are doing. What are the mayors doing? Since we can't get it from the federal level, and I've noticed that when I go on the stimulus updates, there's all these people that talk about stimulus updates. There's about 10 or 20 of them I've subscribed to, and they'll give you updates on the stimulus. But as most of you are aware, it's just been stalled in our Congress. It's stalled everywhere. It's just stalled. I think that is intentional, because if Trump comes in, in September, October, and he says, I'm going to sign this executive order and put, $3,000. No, he'll probably make it $2,000 in everybody's pocket. Well, that's really no money off, the skin off of his back, because he's, just going to be the hero. I got it through with the executive order. Neither party could do it. It's me. I'm the hero. He likes to be the hero. And there are some people that are going to fall for that and go, oh, yes, I'm going to go vote for Trump now because he got, $3,000 in my pocket, or $4,500 if they have kids and stuff. So, but now, all along, there have been certain states and even cities that have been giving extra money to their citizens. So what's this that Carter, and it's Melvin Carter, and a couple others. What are they talking about, Karen?
I'm gonna preface that by telling you about the town of Tenino, 1090 in Washington State. I actually used to live there, and Tenino had a very interesting historical aspect to them. Is that during the Great Depression, they instituted a wooden coin that you could only spend in the town of Tenino. and that allowed them to have a hyper-local economy. What's very interesting now is I just heard that Tenino is doing it again. They're going to have a hyper-local economy. Obviously, at the top, our government is in deadlock, pretty much. I mean, I know we're trying to get new leaders and all those kinds of things, but with the Congress is in deadlock. They can't really get much done. So that has caused a lot of people and cities and everyone who's not the federal government to realize that maybe some of the solutions and ideas need to be local. And so that's one of the aspects of what they're doing with the mayors. And I'll just kind of back up with that. We did not have a lot of tests of a basic type income like a couple of years ago, and then nonprofit organizations, and there was what they call test pilots, which were, they tried it in a small area with a, small group of people, and they're studying it and gathering information about it. Something like a UBI has been piloted actually a number of times in the United States as well as in Canada, as well as in Europe. Michael Tubbs is a very young mayor. He's not even 30 yet. I could adopt him. He's real sweet. But he's the mayor of Stockton, California, and he, got some help from nonprofit or some donations and stuff to start a pilot in his state. I forgot the exact numbers on that. His name's Michael Tubbs, Mayor Michael Tubbs.
I think he's 2,000 people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a chunk of people, and it's a chunk of money. I think it's like a half of the freedom dividend that Ian proposed. And then what they're doing when they do these studies is they compiled, like, who got it, what kind of demographics they were, what did they do with the money, did it help that part of town or something, if they can do that, which is difficult with us all being so mobile. But anyway, that's kind of the idea. And it's having remarkable results because, it turns out that poverty is not a lack of character, it's a lack of cash, okay? And so if you get cash in people's hands, they mostly do the right thing. A lot of argument, I just, on my podcast episode, I talked about how people say, like, you give money to an addict, they're going to go, be addicts. Well, they're probably going to do that anyway. Most of the people do, even homeless people, do very responsible things with it because they are at a substance level, and that most of them can't afford to play around with any money that comes in. And so then that idea, of course, expanded in the presidential run of Andrew Yang. More and more people and government leaders and mayors learned about it. I knew there was potentially a test in Chicago, which would be amazing because that would be probably the biggest test city I know of. But and now Oakland, that's really awesome. Basically, they're joining together to say, hey, let's try to get a test pilot in our city and with our populations and find out what happens. It's kind of what we were doing before COVID and before maybe Kamala Harris's bill. So it's funny because it's starting at the top and the bottom, and hopefully we meet in the middle in order to say, we've got a situation where your patient is out of blood, you need a transfusion. You could wait till the patient makes enough blood for themselves, probably won't happen. In other words, this is the time we do need an infusion of cash, and I learned this from my grandma's eras of people, that it was FDR's policies that started to put cash and give people jobs and get things rolling. But they were doing it for individuals, and that got things started again. But we're not. It's not an event we're talking about. We're talking about a rolling crisis that we weren't ready for to start with, and number two, it's going to take a while to resolve. So what we need is some stabilization factor, something that stabilizes everybody. Maybe you get your check and you don't even know what to do with it right away. I'm going to buy a car because my car is broken, has been sitting in my driveway for a while. That's because, I have no way to get to places. If I try to get to the doctor or something like that, I'm not ashamed to say I got to get some help from the neighbors and borrow their cars. It's the way it is. And that's going to be a real stimulus. If you give people a stimulus or something, and it's just like one-time thing, what are they going to do? Probably just buy food. I don't know if they'd really even have enough to pay rent. So we've got people about ready to get dumped on the streets. And both my partner and I have been homeless at one point or another, him because he was working poor in California, a homeless vet, and I was, a domestic violence survivor. And there was places to go, and if you did find that you had to have temporary housing, for instance, you could go to a hotel. Well, the occupancy for hotels are, cut quite a bit, a ways down. They're not going to be able to take everybody in. So this is allowing this crisis to go to this level. It seems deliberate. It's so bad. It seems like they wanted this to happen, to have things be so bad. So we'll do what? Go get a job at their crappy factory that they're not even have open? I don't understand the point of it. To take control, maybe? I don't know. But I don't think this is still America. We can still call our senators. We can still, support things. We can still communicate with each other. Do all of the above, I think. Stick.
Janet.
Hello.
Deborah.
Hi.
Sorry, Deborah. Somebody was trying to call me when I was. She's passing the stick. Sorry, I had somebody call right on the phone that I'm running the show, and it's like I couldn't talk. Deborah, do you have something you want to say, or do you want me to go?
No, go ahead and go.
Okay, so I was looking. One of the things I posted was talking about. There's some people that say that COVID's not even real. We've got this whole mask or no mask debate. And vaccine, no vaccine debate. And when I Googled it, I found these pictures. Let me scroll down to it, from the smallpox epidemic in the early 1900s. And it shows, if you're able to get to aquarianradio.com and look at the show page for today, you had to, in this smallpox, I think you had to do the vaccination once you caught it. But they showed, there's several pictures of, there's two boys, they're about the same age, and the one boy was given the vaccine, the other one didn't. And the one that did not has blisters. You can't even see the poor kid's face. It's just one big bunch of pustules all over his body. And then they've done another one further down with two young women. Same situation. And that's just what the physical appearance. But when you have something that, like this smallpox, which shows you what the disease is doing to your body, you're more likely to go out and get that vaccination, or you're more likely to, avoid exposure. So to me, this is a big lesson. It's like, wow, if we had COVID and we started to look, literally these poor kids look like monsters. And, they're just, I can imagine what else is going on with the body. So I invite you to go look at that. But I'm just appalled at what's going on with exposing people in general to disease. And I know that each side could come up with their science behind it, but I just put it to the lowest denominator. Can you be kind or cruel? And I can't even begin to go out and, if I have a virus and walk around and give people a virus, I don't even want to make anybody sick, and sometimes people get sick and they get these debilitating diseases that affects their organs, all kinds of things. We don't even know what all it does. It's really deleterious to many people. And some of it's long-term. You might be shortening somebody's life expectancy. They might survive this, but they live 20 years less. I can't, in my morality, I can't begin to do that to another human being. And then a percentage of them die. So I don't understand what's going on with people, that they know that these diseases have been around for thousands of years. And if you go around, you wouldn't go around and have sex with a bunch of people if you had AIDS, right? Sorry, I don't know why everybody's calling me because I'm on the show. They know I'm on the show. or even if you had, what do you call it, an STD, you wouldn't go around and infect everybody. So people are really conscious about not infecting people with diseases in general, but for some reason, like, COVID, everybody just does whatever they want. Somebody's making a lot of background noise. You could mute when you're not talking. That'd be good. So I'm going to pass it now to Deborah because she didn't talk for a while. What do you think about all of this?
Well, part of the problem is the right wing has politicized the virus. The left wing did not politicize it. That's the thing about, all the misinformation that's out there. The right wing has politicized it. And,
right.
One of the reasons why they politicize it, because they didn't want people to realize how bad this was right before an election. And so now you have this politicized disease and you have a narcissistic society, and the mask is to protect the people around you. It also protects you, but that's not the main reason for the mask. That's not the reason for the mask regulations. If you have this virus, or if you are a spreader of this virus and you're asymptomatic, you don't know it. You don't know when you've been exposed. You're not going to know if you're carrying it around and you're contagious. So the mask is not so much for you. It's for other people. That's what I mean about the narcissistic behavior, right? So many people are about me, me, me. This isn't about you. This is about everybody else. And so you have the leader of the free world who initially called this a hoax. And you have people that follow him like he's a cult leader. And so they want to buy into this. And if the virus has not touched you on a personal level, you don't believe this is real. So how do you balance the needs of everybody? So just wear the mask just to be safe. I had my cousin, who's a conservative. The rest of my family is conservative. He drove down to Florida because he buys vehicles down there and brings them back to sell. And he's sitting on my chair today, like I won't hug him. He wanted to hug me, and I wouldn't hug him. And he's like, well, I didn't see anybody that's sick. And I asked him, I said, you're not going to see them sick because they're going to be home quarantined. Why would you think you're going to see anybody sick? I said, they're sitting at home either trying to get better or in the hospital trying not to die. So he goes, well, I wore my mask. And apparently on I-95 going down into Florida, they've got sheriff's deputies that have blocked off the freeway, and you literally have to get off, and they take your information. So they're tracking the people that are coming into the state. But his attitude was so typical of people who, I don't understand why I have to wear this mask. And I looked at him, and I said, look, I'm high risk. You're putting me at risk sitting here being in my house. I have diabetes. So it's just that selfish attitude that is a little mind-boggling. And then all these young people, I get you don't want to be cooped up. I get you don't want to go out and play with your friends. But you know what? Sometimes you got to make sacrifices for the greater good. And I think we have an entire generation of young people that are very self-centered, very narcissistic, and I think, social media and electronic devices and just all the negatives in our society is what has created a generation of people like this. They are the biggest spreaders of COVID at this point. And I sent you an article right before the show that shows that children carry this virus. They believe they carry a viral load that's 100 times higher than an adult. So they may not be getting this disease as much as us, but they are super spreaders if that is the case. And again, most of the regulations make exceptions for children wearing masks. You're going to send these kids to school. Every school that opened up for in-classroom instruction is now shutting down. All the colleges that opened up are now shutting down. As soon as they had people on campus, they started having super spreading events. I believe sending your children to school is playing Russian roulette with their lives. My daughter had that conversation with me. She goes, I wanted to start having some social hours with the kids. I'm like, why? You don't know where people have been. You don't know what precautions they've taken. Why would you take a chance like that with your children's lives? Stick.
Wow. And what did she say?
I talked her out of it. When I sat there and told her everything I knew about the virus, everything I knew about the children, and that's when I said to her, you don't know what the person next to you has done. Do you really want to take a chance with your life or your children's lives not knowing? I don't care what they tell you. You can't believe anything anybody says right now. You know, everybody's looking out for number one. And she goes, okay, I'm canceling it, because she had an adult group going and a children's group going. I said, wait until the worst of this has passed. I said, it's not the end of the world if you have to keep staying home. And why people think staying home is a bad thing? Well, let me tell you why it's a bad thing. Most people don't have any hobbies. All they have are their electronics and the internet, and they're tired of that, which is one of the things that will prevent a lot of new businesses from being started. People don't know how to make things anymore or do things other than press buttons. So we've got to start teaching people skills, teaching them how to do and make things. Usually in downtimes like this is what generates most new businesses, right? This is when they get created out of desperation. But anyways, my daughter bought in, she canceled it, and she agrees with me once I presented the facts to her that she needs to back off from this. It's not the right time. I'm not saying don't do it at all. I'm just saying don't do it right now. Stick.
Interesting. Karen.
Oh, that was good. I think, looking, just kind of bumping back into history, you were looking at measles, I was looking at the Spanish flu, and it's kind of a thing where there's a lot of the same dynamics as people. They were probably less versed in even using a mask, which is part of universal precautions. If you're a person who is in the medical field and you have to work with people, you'll probably get some kind of course or class or orientation where you review universal precautions, and that's what these are. And in the Spanish flu, you start at the beginning where people were mask resistant, and then by the time that it finally rolled through, almost everyone was wearing a mask. And the reason why was because they knew someone had died. And I'd hate to think that we'd get there, but that seems to be where people are at. And there was some missteps of this administration, of course, right? The national COVID response was just not a response. And they told, that the only people dying this are old people, and that kind of started right off the bat in people's introduction of the disease. They're like, oh, I'm young, I'll never get it, I'll live forever. They already have that anyway, and, they're finding out that's actually not true. They may not have the high rate of death, but they're having, they're younger, so they survive it, but they survive it with very debilitating conditions. And so the other thing that was kind of a misstep, I thought, was when they said everyone needs to wear a mask. The home sewer people like, okay, we'll make masks. And then we're told, no, stand down, don't, because we don't believe that you'd make one good enough. And I was like, I could do that, but now I can't. And then they said, oh, yeah, make a mask, and this is what you – it was, trying to get the best information of that. And one of the reasons why they didn't want people to wear a mask right away and they just said wash your hands and don't touch your face was because of the fact that they realized if everybody knew they needed to wear a mask or thought they did, they would deplete the amount of masks that were available for the first responder people and the health authorities and the ones working directly with patients. So now we're back at the same shortage because we're requiring masks for the schools to open, and they're saying, oh, no problem, schools can open. They're going to put their little desk in a little, box, and you're going to have the boy in the bubble, and then, it's going to be great. Well, I had kids, and they swap all kinds of things they probably shouldn't swap. Their lunch, their half-eaten banana, their, whatever. They are messy, and they catch things. It usually rolls through your whole household before you're done from school. And then in the case of the college students, it's not the procedures that are the problem on campus to prevent it. It's the fact that they're partying hard and doing illegal stuff, and it's rolling through. So we're not done. We're not even close to done with this thing. It will eventually, just because of epidemiology and not because I don't believe it's fake. There's a fact that people who had it, I've talked to people who are in the medical field who are dealing with what they see in front of them. So I'm not even going there with that. The people that they're literally locked in, the ones that say no mask and they say it's a fake thing and they say it's a pandemic, which I'm trying to figure out, is it fake? Or is it a virus from China or something? You can't do both, by the way. Those are not compatible. And I've heard the same people say both things. And I'm like, how about you wear the mask until you know for sure? That's kind of my thinking. But they're locked into. They've gotten roped in and locked into a pyramidal information flow that has prevented them from listening to any other point of view, and that really is quite the way a cult works. I would know. I grew up in one because
right.
you only go to trusted hierarchical sources, and it becomes an echo chamber, and you're only paying attention to that. Well, if they've got an agenda that's other than what's right for everyone, and this is, I have to say it. Viruses are they're not political, and they're ecumenical. They just invade human bodies, however that works. And we've had a lot of boning up on this thing as it washed over, not from China, by the way. It started from Europe, actually. And it did come from China on the West Coast, but it was also coming in from Europe. So we've had a learning curve to learn this. We've had a learning curve to learn what kind of procedures are best for society to roll forward. Unfortunately, the part where you wait till you know someone who's died from it will get the point across. And I hate that we're going to have a group of people in our country who really are testing this. Oh, yeah, I double dare you, COVID. And they're going to find out. And it's the way it is, and it's kind of awful. This big?
Yeah. Why do you have to see it to believe it? Why do you have to see somebody die? And it's kind of cruel. People say, oh, I don't know anybody died from it, so why should I worry about it? I don't know anybody. I mean, it's like very cruel. I'm going to pass this on to Deborah. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. Well, I would like to say this. We've had other pandemics in the world and in this country, and we should have learned our lessons from them, and we're not. But part of the reason why people are not believing this is because of all the misinformation. And so many people just get their news from Facebook. It's like our world, from an informational standpoint, has become so narrow, and it's a little scary, and then you've got people that just stay on Facebook literally all day long. And, that's how the Russians figured out how to win the election. They micro-targeted very small groups of people with misinformation, and these people are so ignorant they believe it. And then you have all these young people. When you're young and you think you're invincible, you think you're never going to die, you think your whole life is ahead of you. And, it's very tough to take you down. But, it's the novelty of youth. We've all been there, right? We understand that. You take risks when you're young that you would never take when you're an adult. But I'm like Karen. We've got cult-like followings now with the Republicans and the conservatives and the right wing, and they don't deal in truth. They don't deal in facts. They don't believe in science. They don't believe in data because it doesn't support their beliefs. And isn't that part of what goes into cult thinking, Karen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that pyramidal structure almost always, has in place a charismatic leader figure, Typically that person psychologically is a narcissistic psychopath. And, they basically do not have, but I always say when you're dealing with, especially with a narcissist of note, the only thing you ever get from them is betrayal because you're not in their formula. They are the only one in their formula.
Yep.
And the psychopathic part of them, they have no empathy. There's no feeling for you. So one of the dynamics that happens, if there's a bunch of people dying because they went to a Trump rally or something like that, he doesn't care because he knows he's lying to them. He thinks they're stupid. He doesn't care. And I see that. It's a little hard to convince other people, well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, just go find out because what's going to happen is you're going to get sold down the river. It's going to happen. They'll make sure there's consequences for believing them, And they even do that as a loyalty test. If I do this to you, but you still come back, then you're still loyal to me, right? The dynamics of that, I hate to have people find out the hard way what this kind of personality style is, but sometimes I know I went through that because not only was I involved in my cult with charismatic type leaders, but I also had I got married in the faith, as they say, with someone with that personality type, and now it's burned into my mind of what you're dealing with, and the words I'm saying, I didn't even know what that was. Like, it was a huge revelation to find out that kind of personality style exists. Typically can become a leader because they're incredibly single-minded about what they want. And then they can turn the group into what they call the narcissist needs attention. They need supply. It's basic energy. They need attention energy. It's on this show we can say that when I pay attention to you, I'm feeding you a little bit of energy. It's centripetal energy. And they're a black hole of sucking in energy in that way. Sometimes it's called loosh, Loosh. And so the thing is that's a black hole, and no light's going to come out of that. Nothing for you is going to come out of that. So it's important to look for loyalty tests. Are you going to commit that crime for me and build that wall by committing crime? Are you, this is what the inner circle's going through. Are you going to do that for me? Are you going to take away all those machines? And by the way, they dismantled the sorters. They couldn't even put the sorters back online because they're dismantled. Are you going to do that for me, Joy? And go to jail for me? I see the loyalty test aspect of this to the underlings so much, and that's part of what drives them to do what they do. It's astonishing, and sometimes they're doing stuff that they said they wouldn't do. In other words, did actually believe these things, but because they're now in that system, then they trample all over what it is they thought they believed, just because they're in a hierarchical, system. So it's what they practice, I believe, in tampering with what I used to be a church and that became a cult, and I think it was some form of mind control tampering. And they practice on people like that, what I grew up in, and they unleashed it on the whole United States, I think. That's what I observe it. Do I have the proof? Boy, it looks correct. That looks correct to me. And I'm passing the stick.
All right, let's see. Let's do a time check. We still have about 45 minutes, and we can go the whole time, or we can, we're on a free flow here. But what is the most, let's see, we were talking about, like, consensus reality. What kind of hologram are you in? Simulation hypothesis. Is this the Matrix? Is this a virtual reality? Yeah, we wanted to talk about Manafort. He works for Russian intelligence. Who has more information on that? The California fires, the earth changes, and we can talk about whatever, even something that's not on our topic list. So who wants to introduce the next topic for the next round of conversation? Raise your hand or just speak up.
Shall we talk about Manafort?
Yeah.
What do you know about Manafort?
I know he's a criminal, and he's obviously a Russian pawn. And the state of New York is now trying to file charges against him again, fraud charges against him again. They were tossed out earlier because of the double jeopardy rule. but the Attorney General is now saying there's elements of those crimes that were not covered in the federal conviction that can be covered in the state conviction. So they're still trying to go after him as of today. But, I mean, he's doing, 7.5 years in prison. He's now at home right now because of the COVID situation, which I don't believe should have been allowed, especially for him. But the Senate intelligence report that came out this week, that was a bipartisan investigation, which means half Republicans and half Democrats, for those who don't want to believe, who want to believe this was just drafted by the left. All of the crimes that the Trump campaign team were accused of, they're guilty of. Read that report. Janet, I don't know, Janet, did you get it posted in the show page?
I do have, it seems like it's not the full thing. It says read in Apple News, so I have to click on it. Let's see. No, I didn't get the whole thing. I just had the first part.
Okay.
Let me see if I click on it.
So
no,
the
it's not
report
coming up.
is out there for people to download in a PDF. And not only did they issue this report, which was the last one in a series of 5, they recommended to the DOJ that Bannon, Kushner, Don Jr., and Eric Prince be brought up on charges. But, of course, because Barr is there, that didn't happen. So hopefully the Democrats win and they don't let this die, because those people should all be going to jail. They sold this country out to the Russians so that they could gain power. And now this man is creating a... No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, okay. So what's in it for them? You know, is Russia going to say, "Come and live here"? Why would an American do that? Did they give him money? Did they give him a promise of power? Let's speculate. I like to speculate. What do you think? Why would these people do this?
I believe Trump had business interests in Russia that he plans on pursuing after this was all over. I also believe the Russians made promises to him of certain things he was going to get if he could achieve certain goals. I mean, in 2016 at the RNC convention, their platform was dictated by Russian intelligence. It was changed at the last minute, and it was dictated by all the things that the Russian intelligence wanted. Like, Manafort was a direct link to Russian intelligence. He was dealing with someone who was an ex-KGB officer on a regular basis. And they were trying to spin it like it was Ukraine doing it and pointing the fingers at Ukraine. It was the Russians, and he helped them. And it's for money. Obviously, they did it for money and power. They thought if they could get in power, there was money to be made. I mean, when Trump first won, his children went out and started, setting up meet and greets and charging people $25,000 to come and meet them, obviously selling access to the White House. So, there was personal gain to be had one way or the other. Financial, other types of assets that aren't financial, who knows? I believe they were going to sell this country, they were going to turn this country over to the Russians. That's what I believe. And I know that's a little scary, but I believe if they win another 4 years, they will. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see the Russian military on our soil. Stick.
Right. And so they give us to the Russians. Trump gets to be king for life, like Putin. How old is Putin, by the way? He's going to be in till the 2030s or something. He's already got himself set in place.
Only 60.
He's 60 or something.
Yeah, he's not that old. Yeah, I don't think he's that old. 2036.
So we have Manafort arrested, Bannon. That was interesting. We were talking about Bannon yesterday. Now he's arrested.
Yep.
And so if Trump doesn't get elected again, he's apparently going to get arrested because these things apply to him because he was living in New York. And even though he moved his main office, doesn't mean he's not subject to those crimes that were committed when he lived there. So I think that's the plan. They can't try him on a federal level, but they can bring him down to the state level. And that's why he was so happy that New York got COVID and was struggling.
Yes.
And he's probably laughing right now because California's in flames.
Oh, yes.
Do you think there's something there?
Mm-hmm. He cut off all the funding, the forestry funding. They even had
but this
someone
is like
who worked...
evil.
Yes, he is evil. He's a narcissist, like she said. You get nothing but betrayal.
Yes, absolutely.
Karen?
And they'll work on stabilization by destabilization because they know they can reorder things and turn it the way. And then they've pretty much been doing that with impunity. Although I'm always surprised when one of these guys gets arrested, just because you've lived with the injustice of it for so dang long, But another sort of a sign is that they keep pushing. They'll start back with something not as, it's outrageous, but and they keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and then they cross the line. They're trying to find out how much we're going to put up with, And how this works out on an individual basis is very difficult. I think about how to deal with this on an individual basis with families and friends and things like that. Then I think about what's happening at the national level, because the more threatened a cult type, obviously you learn this from Jonestown, the more threatened the group feels, the more likely that some very disastrous stuff will happen. That won't just be, a lot of groups who are insisting they have the right to assemble and meet. They're becoming super spreader organizations, pastors that said, we have the right, God will protect us, and where's your faith? I've literally heard him say, where's your faith? Well, God made the virus, if you believe that, and so there you go. So if you're going to go with nature, it comes from God, then what's this about? It's been pandemics have been run through many civilizations over, thousands of years. It's a thing. It's part of nature. It's part of the system, however that works. I'm not entirely sure, what the dynamics are, but it's part of nature. Even if you tweak it with some kind of genetics, it's still coming from nature. And we got to deal with that. And the main thing is just be resilient. And resilience requires the distribution of resources over the whole population. This is the constant mistake that happens, is when you concentrate wealth into one area, you don't have the ability to respond, responsibility, right? Ability to respond. You don't have the ability to respond locally, then that local thing becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, where if the people there had the resources, they could lock it down. So we're going to be dealing with, without the resources being distributed to communities, and that they're even going further down in their ability to gather resources. If we go many more months where we don't have any income for a lot of people, our ability to do even in those basic hygiene type of things, or keeping your town going infrastructure-wise, is going to be affected. This is very, very, very serious. We have got to stabilize regular people, because regular people make sure that the dam doesn't do a spillway and flood your town. Regular people go in and make sure the nuclear plant's working really well. Regular people, you know what I'm saying? If we let this run amok, you're starting to deal with the people that, not just the frontline workers, that people who are sick, you're going to be dealing with the people who run your town. And you forget how intricate systems are until they stop working. Okay? Then, now you got a whole different thing. So this is the wrongest, I think about this. Apparently they want to do it the wrongest possible way, try every way not to do it, till they eventually realize that there might be some other alternatives. There are other ideas. This is not a bifurcated this or that. And I don't think I've ever found too many choices where just this or that. Sometimes. But most of the time, if you get creative, there might be another option. I'm always looking for it. Usually this or that means for another. Pass the stick.
Okay, passing the stick. All right. So let me see what else I want to cover here. I'm looking at our page that I created. It's on aquarianradio.com. Please feel free to go and look at that. At the bottom, I think you need to look at all these articles. Deborah, you sent a few other articles. Is there anything in particular you want to discuss from the other articles that you read over the course? And you're welcome to do this too, Karen. We look at articles, Deborah and I do, and we just shoot them to each other. Like, hey, this is relevant, this is relevant. And the course of the week, I do what I can to grab them and put them all on the Elephants in the Room page that I create for each week. But I sometimes miss them because I don't see them right away. And so we covered the Steve. Did we cover Steve Bannon enough? We have all the information there about the building the wall fundraising campaign to enrich himself. So what's he going to do with all this money now? He's in jail. I mean, how long can they keep him?
Oh,
is this like a 5-year sentence, a 30-year sentence, or what kind of sentence do you think he'll get?
I don't know. I don't know what the charges are. I mean, it's fraud, obviously, but there's other charges, and it's the Southern District of New York, I believe, again, that did this, which is the federal district office where they just fired that man and put a Trump loyalist in place who's never even been a practicing attorney. He worked at the SEC for years, so who knows? I mean, I'm sure this thing will get, I don't know. Trump didn't like Bannon. Even though Bannon kept tooting his horn even after he got fired, Trump didn't like him. Mm-hmm. And you've now got, 10 or 12 people that worked in the Trump administration that have now been either brought up in charges and or convicted. So I don't know. And there was a law in this country, too. There's federal laws that prevent the president from pardoning anyone that was complicit in a crime that he was convicted of. So he was impeached, but he wasn't convicted of the charges. So that created gray area there, right? So he's talking about pardoning Stone, right? He's talked about pardoning Manafort. He's talked about pardoning the general. What was his name? The one that got fired for lying about the Russian company.
Yeah.
Flynn, right? He's talked about pardoning Flynn. He's talked about pardoning all the people that were complicit in this crime. Now that Senate report is out and said they did this was a Senate investigation, all the evidence of it is documented in this report, can he pardon them? I don't know. So
seems like he can because he does. They get pardoned.
Well,
it's like,
he hasn't done it yet. He hasn't pardoned any of these guys yet. He said he was going to, but he hasn't done it. Because what happens if he pardons them, right? And if he does not win, I think if he pardons them, it'll happen after the election. Because at that point, he can't be in office anymore, unless he tries to take control of this country. But the military is not behind him, which is why I don't believe it'll happen. The generals don't support him. Most of the soldiers don't support him. Most of the soldiers think he's an idiot. You've got that small segment, like 30% of the soldiers, just like you have 30% of the population that support him, and that's it. So, and I don't believe, like I said, our soldiers will turn on us. I don't believe our generals will turn on us. And I don't care who he puts in charge of them. Even the Republicans at this point are just sick and disgusted of the chaos and the drama behind this man. They want to stay in power. I think they dread the fact that the only way they can stay in power is with him at the head of this. But who knows? Do I think Bannon and these guys are going to get in trouble? Absolutely. These guys stole millions of dollars that was supposed to go to a nonprofit. And so there's a violation of state and federal laws involved in that. So if this came out of the Southern District of New York, my suspicion is there's a violation of probably New York state laws too. Now, some of the other gentlemen lived in other parts of the country. One of the vets that started this lived down in Florida. So who knows, right? But Florida is obviously a big Trump-supporting state, so nothing will probably come of that. But New York despises Trump. And honestly, outside of New York City, it's a very conservative state. I know New York City is red, but the state itself is not red. Even though most of our political offices are held by Democrats, the populace in general outside of New York City is very conservative and very right-wing. You know, I feel like a fish out of water here in Niagara Falls because so many people here are conservative. Yeah, like my entire family here, they're very conservative. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But Trump, Trump didn't throw support at him the way he threw support at Flynn. You know, when I say through support, through media, public media support. You know, he said good things about Flynn even after he was convicted. He said good things about Stone even after he was convicted. He was distancing himself from Bannon today, and saying he felt like that wall was inappropriate. But, he goes on record a few months earlier saying he totally supported that part of the wall. So who knows,
Well, that's part of the active measures is you never are consistent. You confuse the population. That's why when we're doing a show with my brother, with James, what was his name, Tolley, about active measures, and he said, well, you do know that, Trump has admitted that Obama's birth certificate was real. And the supporters get so confused about what's the information because it goes on so long in one direction. Like, Trump went on for, 6 months, 7 months. I don't have to wear a mask. And then all of a sudden he's wearing a mask. But because it was so long without a mask, everybody thinks that, if you wear a mask, you're a Democrat. And I want to prove it's all loyalty, just like Karen said. I want to prove that I'm loyal to my Trump. So, and they've also equated it to liberty and not liberty. And it's like, what? It's got nothing to do with liberty. It comes about, it's about keeping yourself safe from disease and keeping your family and your friends and your community safe from disease. And we see things all over the place. They allowed tourists into New Zealand, and they had no cases, and now they're dealing with all this stuff. Well, they allowed tourists into Maui. They didn't have anything. Well, they supposedly had this quarantine thing, and they were trusting these people. They signed papers. They're going to come and they're going to quarantine, and in place. They're going to stay in place. And they didn't do it. There were like all these people that went out to the drumming circles and the tourist attractions, and so the local population was, we're down to zero. We don't have any cases, less than 10, right? And so they're taking off their masks. They think it's okay to at least be on a beach. And these tourists come and they walk into the group on the beach. They're outside, but then we've got all these people in the hospital now. And now the staff, nursing staff, or the doctors, they've got like 11 or 12 of them are infected. What do you do when your healthcare workers can't show up? Who's going to take care of these people? They're all in intensive care. By the time they go into the hospital, they're in intensive care. They're not really taking people that got a little bit thing going on. They help. They send them home. They say just stay at home, and if you worse, come back. But if not. If it's mild, they're not admitting those people. They're just admitting severe people. So this whole thing's insane. And then the schools reopening. What an insane idea. I'm going to send my kids. If I was a mother, there's no way. You're not going to school. So anyway.
But you're saying that, Janet, because I was a homeschooling mom and people thought I was crazy, but I had a medically fragile child. I do, actually. And I was like, no, I'm not going to put them at risk and my daughter at risk. When, as she got older, her system settled down and she was able to handle things. But everyone's doing what I did. It's now popular homeschooling. And you find out that there's there's benefits in, whatever, either way. I mean, I believe in parents making a choice, at least when it's not a health emergency type choice, But the thing is we're heading into what I call getting your Etch-a-Sketch shook, meaning that the institutions and that we thought were just absolutely necessary and we just can't live without them, we're finding out that some of the aspects of those systems, again, back to systems theory, because that's how we're getting in it and that's how we're getting out of it. You've got to analyze what systems that you have in place. So, for instance, you have people, think all of the employees of the Twitter Corporation, if I'm not mistaken, are now home-based workers, or it might have been T-Mobile. I'm not sure, one of those two companies. But basically, they sent everyone home, and then they realized they don't have to do a lease on all, if they work on the technology to make sure their workers can work, then they don't have to pay all that money to empty buildings, or, for rent of physical plant, okay? That's a legitimate adjustment for certain types of companies that are basically telecommunications oriented anyway. They're just sitting in a box with their computer. It doesn't matter if the box is at their house or if the box is at the job. And corporations are ruthlessly efficient. They are going to cut out anything that is any kind of extra that isn't needed, and they're finding out that we're at the point with the development of technology, like I said before, that makes it possible to do this. Well, schools are obviously way behind that and do not have the financial means to do quite the same thing. But people are finding out there's kind of some advantages to having the kids home. One of them is the fact that they're not, obviously not spreading diseases. That's all the time. When I was a little kid, I got one of these viruses that went through. I think it was a flu virus, and then I got pneumonia from it, and I got lung damage. And that's one of the reasons why I have a pre-existing condition that I have to be careful of in this virus, is because I've already been hammered by a virus. I survived, but I had a damaged lung at the age of 7. I might have been a little older, age of 9. Pardon me. I was sick all summer long. My reading speed went really high because all I did was read books. But that's the thing, is that the way that we look at things that we think are essential, we might find out requires some adjustment, and we'll get some adjustment because of how we're going to be doing things is going to be different. We're going there, can't stop it. That means that how we work and what kind of job we have might be quite different from what we had before. But we've got to capitalize those things. We've got to finance those things. We've got to get money to be able to develop those systems. A lot of people need to have their kids go back to school, they think, because they don't have the technology in their home to support, 3 or 4 kids online with their teachers and stuff. I mean, we've got to get money into the hands of people so they can make the individual adaptation. I just did the math. It's been 6 months. If we get Kamala Harris, bill gets passed, that's $12,000. Think about that. That is going to make sure that you have a computer and some things that right now people are going without. So that would make a big difference because we have to now respond individually. Yes, there's guidelines. Yes, there's competing guidelines. Yes, everyone they're trying to figure out, but it's very every day in your home. You can't go on automatic pilot. You can't just do things the way you used to. It's kind of mentally taxing in a way. I feel kind of mentally exhausted, especially the first couple of months of this thing, by trying to think, okay, we can't get toilet paper. I could fill some cloths, and we could use those. I mean, literally every daily activity that I could think of to try to say, because we didn't know, were we ever going to ever get toilet paper again? I don't know. All my clothes started to look like potential toilet paper. I'm just saying. So I, figured out how I was going to do it. So it's kind of like, this might be actually quite transformative. We could actually be making some decisions, and I hope that the minds that have this in their mind to do this begin to rise to the, attention of people. because this might be one of the faster tracks to a Star Trekian world, because we do have tools. They're stuck over there in a toolbox in a rich guy's garage. But we do have tools to handle things right now. They just need to be brought out and used by regular people. You know, I believe in regular people more than I believe in all the money of, you know, of rich people. Like that song, Peace on Earth is all it said, and it's right here inside of us, all the potential. Just got to release it. So I am passing the stick.
I'm looking at big spender families could get $50,000 in stimulus payments right away if bill backed by Bernie and Kamala Harris passes. That was dated the 16th of August. Today's the 20th. I didn't hear this one. So this is sponsored by Sanders, Gillibrand, Markey. It's called the Monthly Economic Crisis Support. It was back in May, which would provide $2,000 each for married couples and up to 3 children. It's unlikely to pass, but technically still on the table. So you're saying that this is being seriously considered now, Karen?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, it says under the proposal, a lump sum would be provided retroactive to March. So families would receive 5 months' worth of payments, and the amount would be increased to $2,000 per individual. So you're saying that I could get 5 times 2,000 times 2 people. I would like that. I could fix my roof. Okay.
They were talking about get retroactive to March. Can you imagine? March, April, May, June, July.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are. And you know
well,
what?
This is like Christmas.
It is the Christmas I've never had. But one thing, it's definitely like some people have different things that they're working through and different needs, but it immediately could get people caught up on rent, you know, and get that rent. There's going to have to be some work. We have hardwired measures in our society. So people who've not been able to pay their rent, even if they could pay all their back pay rent, they still have the record on their credit report dealing with the fact that they didn't pay that whole time. So we're kind of also looking to where our numbers are going to melt like Jell-O in the sun, because they're not going to make any sense. If you give that much money to people who get Social Security, disability, or SSI, they're not allowed to have $2,000 at all. So I don't know what's going to happen for people who have caps on how much that they're allowed to keep. Will it stop payments, or what the heck? You know, I don't know. Maybe we don't need them if we have the basic income, but that also affects health care. So if you're an SSI recipient, you get a cash stipend, but you also get health care with that. There are hard caps. If you make too much money, are you going to have your health care ripped out from underneath you? So
well, they don't count it as income, but you better not have it sitting in your account when you're going through an evaluation. So you better spend it quick. So say you this is the last thing you're going to get for forever, right? I mean, this could go on for 2 years. It's COVID, right? So you're going to get this one last stimulus check. So you're going to want to keep it somewhere for a rainy day. You're going to feed your family for, 6 months to a year or 2 years, right? So you're going to want to. But the other things count. They penalize you for having money in your bank. So if you're getting food stamps and you have all this money in your bank, they're going to take away your food stamps. It's like they shouldn't be. It should not affect anything else that you're getting already. This is a stimulus check. It's not about taking, giving that and taking away other things. We need to continue what we already have. This is supposed to give us a funds to survive until the end of COVID. We've got to do this till the end of COVID, and COVID may not be ending.
Yeah, the word stimulus is really important. Stimulus is not a stimulus if the amount that we get is, and I did say something about that in the bill, if you owe on your car or something, or you owe a creditor or something like that, boom, and they take your money. That's not a stimulus because it's going to go to a big giant account. Stimulus means it's supposed to cycle through the economy. You're supposed to go spend it. Typically people on the lower income level go spend it. They don't save it or anything like that because they've got basic needs. They go spend it, and then that causes the uptick in customers at the store, and then, stock goes up, and that's what the point of a stimulus is. We've got, I call them poverty traps, where the money goes, in and goes right back out to another big coffer somewhere, and if we don't,
right.
This has been another aspect, is all the debt that is carried by individuals, when they now don't have their job and they can't pay that bill, but they still have that debt. I mean, the way that we have hard wires in here actually would slow down us recovering, in a sense, because we'd be servicing the debt. So, for instance, somebody who graduates with a degree that could get them a good job, but they put all their money into paying the debt of the education, and they actually can't stimulate their own economy of themselves, and therefore the economy, by having more discretionary spending. We actually have these roadblocks. It's part of the machine that makes that makes the wealth inequality, has hard wires in it to always be redistributing wealth up. Conservatives frustrate me because they talk about wealth redistribution and only point to what happens with communism, and completely miss the elephant in the room. Oh, hey, I know why Bannon and Trump didn't like each other. Two elephants in the room, right? Two narcissists.
Right.
But there's a machine here, and this machine is constantly funneling resources and money up. It's redistributing up to the top of the pyramid. The redistribution they complain about is anything that comes down. Well, it's got to come down sometime, because if people don't have money to spend in the store, how long is the store going to be open? Hello. So we've kind of cut short our ability to recover from something this catastrophic, unless we start having a functional Congress, for one thing, to where you can start addressing the hardwire and the machinery that's in place to keep money from getting into the hands of, as Andrew Yang says, get the money in our hands. We know what to do with it. And I agree with them. And I'm passing the stick.
Cool. Okay, Deborah, we haven't heard from you in a while.
Well, I wanted to
speak
to the changes that Karen said could potentially happen. One of the things I'm hoping for is that multi-generational homes will occur again, right? Because one of the things that's disturbed me about society is what we do to our old people. Nobody takes care of them. And if they can't remain in their home, they end up in old folks' homes. And my daughter asked me, when my grandmother was going through this, because we tried to keep my grandma in her home until we couldn't anymore. And she goes, how did they used to take care of them? I said, you had multiple generations that lived in a home. The oldest generation helped with the kids so that the parents could go out and earn a living or whatever it was, right? And so there was always this give and take in the support structure around the nuclear family that allowed them to thrive. And now that nuclear family is kind of dissolved, and you move away, you have a tendency to move away from your family and live in another part of the country, usually very far away. We've got the baby boomers that are now, they've already recognized there are not enough resources in this country to support the baby boomers when they're old. So what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen once all these homes where the elderly go to, when they're all filled up and there's no place for people to go? And that is coming. And, you're going to have mass evictions across the country now that the stimulus money has run out. So people are going to start having to go home to their parents or go home to a relative or to whoever will take them in. My daughter and I have talked about that when they come back from their military deployment, of us all moving in together, because I've now been pushed into semi-retirement. My chances at this point of finding a job now are probably non-existent. I'm older, I'm expensive, I'm experienced, right? So I'm creating revenue opportunities for myself because I've wrapped my head around the fact that I'll probably never work for another employer again, unless I'm willing to work for minimum wage, which I'm not willing to do. I have skills and value, and I'm not going to be pushed into that. I'll be pushed into my own business before I'll be pushed into working for minimum wage. But, we would like to create a multi-generational household. where I'm helping with the children. My daughter homeschools, and I'm so glad she does. And she does a very good job of it. And now with COVID, I'm even more grateful that she's homeschooling. She's already there. You know, there's millions of families around the country that are trying to figure out how to get there. But she's been there now for 2 years. So this hasn't affected them. But when they come home, you know, we would like to create a multi-generational family where I'm taking care of them, they're taking care of me as I age, right? So I don't end up going to a home. You know, when my grandmother was going through this, I wasn't in a position where I could quit my job, but had I been, I would have come and taken care of my grandmother, so that never happened to her. So anyways, that's one of the things that I'm hoping, that multi-generational homes will occur again, and they'll start being a family structure that supports generations up and down the age spectrum, passing the stick.
Well, my brother has a household, and he's a senior. His son lives there, his granddaughter, and she doesn't have custody of her children right now because of something, but she could at any time bring her children back. He has a big enough apartment they're renting, and he would love to have it. They have been there in the past, so he's doing it. And when I was growing up in Pittsburgh in a town called Avalon, it was the 50s and 60s, and that was very common to have multi-generational families. My house that I grew up in, my mother had her mother and her mother, her mother's mother, and then her children until that generation passed. So that was more common back then than you would even imagine. So what happens when they get old? Well, you have your grandmother or grandfather generation, and they live there till they die. That's what happens when they get old. They don't get old and they ship them off somewhere else. When they need hospice, they set up a bed in the house. And in the house I grew up in, my mother told me that her mother died there, their grandmother died there, her father died there. Back in those days, they did not take them to funeral homes. They would set up the body in the living room, and then they would invite people over to pay their respects, and then they would, take the body and bury it. And so it was a different world, but we can get back to that. Maybe that's what COVID is about. Let's return to something more heart-centered, home-centered, and because we won't be traveling so much. Maybe this will change it for good. I didn't like driving an hour and 15 minutes one way to go to work, and then an hour and 15 minutes to get home. And then it took me, I had to get dressed to the hilt and then I bought all these clothes so I could be in this, they had a dress code. You had to dress a certain way. So I had to, have the wardrobe. And then I got into materialistic competition. I want to look better than those girls. And, I fall into it just like anybody else. So I loved it when I stopped working in the corporate world. So maybe there's a lot of people out there that's like, I don't have to go and spend all my money on a wardrobe and getting all dolled up every day to go to work. I can just work out of my home, and I can there's a lot of people that bought a lot of pajamas that are fun, right? And so I spend most of my day in these nice little long shirts instead of getting dressed. So go ahead, next person.
Oh, I was just going to say real quick, because I don't know our time factor, but there was one company that told their employees that they have to wear pants when they're on a Zoom meeting. Because they were wearing pants. Sometimes they forget and get up or something, and everyone got to see whatever was under the table. So, yeah, it's kind of a different realm. And there's people doing, crazy backgrounds. Like one lady I Zoom with, and she has Hogwarts in the back, Maybe they'll have, Zoom clothing at some point. I'm not sure. Zoom suits.
Zoom suits. But my husband early on, when we first had that, this was a good 10 years ago, he stands up and he gave everybody a shot. What he had, because he doesn't wear underpants. And I go, honey, you just mooned everybody. So, yeah, you got to be careful of that. We are running out of time, so let's wrap this up, I guess. Closing statements. Who wants to go first, Karen or Deborah? Closing statements.
Let Karen go. I don't know what my statement's going to be yet.
I don't know what my statement is either, except for it is important to look at patterns in all of this and look at and believe for intentions that are for the good in the finality. It's pretty awful right now, but it's like mentally healthy to look for things that are positive that are either going on or could happen. So that's just kind of what I'm doing for myself, and I share that with everyone. Passing the stick.
Deborah.
Wrapping it up. Let's hope Steve Bannon goes to prison.
Yeah. I hope. Well, what does that mean? He'll just be in his house. But yeah. We're all in our houses anyway. What kind of punishment is that? He's going to be stuck in his house. Yeah. Well, anything else you want to say, Deborah? I'm sorry. I had to add my 2 cents for that one.
Wear a mask. That's the only thing I can say. Wear a mask.
Yeah. I agree. Wear a mask, social distance. Only go out when you need things. If we were to have done this since the beginning, we would be through this. But our whole, not just the United States, the whole world has been Trumpismed, which was this disregard for consciousness, disregard for no respect for other people, total narcissistic behavior and attitudes. And I hope that COVID will return us to some kind of love, respect, consciousness, honoring our fellow human beings, because we're all in this together. And COVID shows us that we all breathe the same air. And each breath that we take has been around since the creation of this earth. It's been around and been through all of our ancestors, through everybody alive. And so our air is sacred, and we need to do what we can to filter out these harmful, and not just COVID, but, when I was a kid, I almost died of the regular flu. We've got to respect people. We've got to be conscious and not infect people with any kind of diseases. If you're going somewhere and somebody's got cancer, you should be always wearing a mask. If you have any relatives that have like diabetes, or they're going through some treatment, or they're high risk, you just don't walk into somebody's house. You don't walk up to people anymore. Please, social distance. I have workers that have come to my house, and I've had to say, hey, I'm under quarantine here. Please stay at least 6 feet away and learn how to protect yourself and speak up. This is not the time to be polite. When someone is coming too close to you and you don't want them to say, hey, please, stay back. I am high risk. Stay back. So with that, I'm going to hope that we all have a good week. We'll see you again this time next week on Elephants in Our Rooms. And I'm going to play some music. I haven't listened to this in a long time. So it says YouTube music. So you have to have music that YouTube will let you have, because this gets uploaded to about 10 to 20 different platforms. So much love and blessings, and aloha. Be well.